Hey, just before we jump into the episode, I'm wondering if you're using MEDDPICC at your company, if you're an AE or a sales leader listening to this. I've implemented MEDDPICC 3 times when I was a VP of sales, and now I help sales organizations implement MEDDPICC with their teams. I've got a free deal scorecard that you can basically evaluate and score your opportunities using the MEDDPICC framework to see where you've got gaps, where there's risk in your forecast, so that you can identify them and do something about it and mitigate that risk. So if you want to get a copy of that, head over to the website. There'll also be a link in the show notes. Go to therevenueenabler.com. You'll see there's a drop down called the Learning Hub. There's a button called the Downloads. When you go there, you're looking for the MEDDPICC deal score sheet. You can get instant access to that, as well as other things like the What We've Heard slide, my ghosting playbook, cold call scorecard, story builder, AI sales assistant, and so much more. So head over to therevenueenabler.com, go check out the Learning Hub and our downloads, and let's jump into the episode now.
Welcome everyone to Hit Your Numbers, the weekly podcast for sellers and sales leaders who are serious about hitting their targets. I'm Matthew Terrell, I am the CMO at the Revenue Enabler, and I'm here with James Bissell. He was an SDR turned AE and then twice VP of sales, and now the founder of the Revenue Enabler. This week we are talking about booking more meetings, increasing win rates, and increasing deal sizes. This is going to be a big show. James, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, Matt. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Good, because it's going to be all about you. We're going to deep dive into your history of sales and really find out what you've been up to.
Okay, great. I've got coffee. I'm ready to roll.
Great, perfect. I also have coffee. It's a bit late in the day, but you know what? We're doing 3 back-to-back recordings today, so let's bring on the coffee. Okay, James, let's start off with setting the scenes for the listeners. Okay, so if anyone's listening to this and you've listened to a few episodes by now, you'll know a bit about James, you'll know a little bit about myself as well, but more importantly, his background is what's brought us here to today. And during that journey, he's led various sales teams. He's increased deal sizes, booked more meetings than anyone else. He's reduced the time to close by 64% in one of those cases. And we're here today to find out why. Like, how did you do it? What were the tactics? How did you increase the win rate? How did you book more meetings? How did you reduce the time to close? That's kind of what I want to know. And I'm sure the listeners want to know is how do you go about doing all those things? So let's start off by setting the scene. So James, if you could set the scene for us, where were you in your career path? Was this a new job? Was it one company? Was it multiple companies? Let us know.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people that listen to this will probably resonate with this journey. I went through most of my sales career without any formal sales training, little to no coaching, and making a load of mistakes. Going out there, making mistakes, getting very frustrated, maybe a little bit angry at myself, doubting if sales is for me, because I didn't really know what I was doing, and it wasn't like it is today where you can go and buy access to a community or a course or get coaching with somebody that's been there, done it, figured it out. That stuff didn't exist. Like, we didn't even have database tools. You would literally drive around an industrial estate with a pen and paper, look at the size of a business and go, that looks pretty big. I bet they need a big IT network. Go back and ask the assistant, the accounting team that managed Sage, which had a CRM bolt on to input the data. Then you would call it and you just phone up the receptionist and ask who makes decision on IT spend at your business. That's where it started, right? So, kind of just give you that context. So I just went through most of my career figuring things out. So when I became a sales leader, it's kind of like people talk about, you hear these stories when you listen to people's stories about how they went through their life and, their parents weren't great to them. So when they had kids, they wanted to do the complete opposite. I'm not saying it's anywhere near as intense as that, but when I became a sales leader, I didn't want to be that sales leader that just neglected the team. The way I see sales leadership, yes, you got to hit a big number, but the way you're going to get there is by making your people elite, training, coaching, enabling them, turning them from, average performers into elite sellers. And that stuff takes time. And, that's kind of when it all really started to click for me. Is I figured out how to sell after making a load of mistakes. When I stepped up to be a sales leader, I just started to document the playbook and then hold myself and my team accountable for becoming elite. So that's kind of the backstory there. Went through like everyone else, stumbled into sales, got very little formal training, got some good training at BT, don't get me wrong. Like, they put us through Huthwaite spin selling, which was a fantastic 3-day course. I've still got the massive pack that they gave me. So they, left a lasting impression. But other than that, that's pretty much those 3 days. is my kind of training journey as a seller.
Lovely, and a big shout out there to BT.
Massive shout out to BT. There we go.
So, what was the state of the sales organization when you became a VP of sales? What were the main KPIs, challenges? Like, what did you inherit when you got that job?
Yeah, so there was like I led two teams. One of them was a HR tech company called Staff Circle. I got that job probably like 3 months, 4 months into the pandemic. So everyone that was selling then knows how hard it was, unless you're Zoom. They were doing very well, right? So I think we all contributed to that.
Zoom were doing really well, but we have had them as customers.
Yes. Yeah, we've done some nice coaching there, so it's great. Yeah, and actually interviewed Andy, head of mid-market sales at Zoom, and had a fantastic conversation with him. And he's doing some great stuff with his teams, and very kind of forward-thinking sales leader. Yeah, like when I landed that role, it was very early stage, Matt. Like there was 7 employees, 8 employees, maybe 12, 15 customers. I think the market was ready for change in what we were selling, but we were selling to a very hard to sell to persona. Not because they were against change, they just usually didn't have a seat at the table and budget to execute. And I'm talking about HR. So most organizations, HR aren't treated as like a massive value add. They're usually left out of board meetings or executive conversations. They usually don't have a budget to execute. They usually roll up to, in like mid-market, smaller organizations, into like the COO or the CFO. And if they want to, change or do something differently, they have to go internally and ask for it. And unless it's going to add value, especially in the pandemic, business value, it would usually get rejected. So we ran into a lot of challenges, but I wouldn't say I inherited any kind of bad historical sales leaders that had been in and made a bunch of mistakes and like neglected the team and things like that. There wasn't really a team for that to happen. I had to build it from the ground up. The second business was, completely different. That sales org had been around for a little while, and there was some bad behaviors and some deep challenges that needed to be solved.
So, when you got into both of these organizations, when you looked under the hood, what was the biggest blocker to growth that you uncovered? What did you immediately see that you just saw, okay, we've got a challenge on our hands here? Apart from maybe not having a sales team, that sounds like quite a challenge, but was there anything else that stood out?
Yeah, well, let's talk about discovery, shall we? Because I think we shouldn't be labeling discovery as a stage in our CRM, because it creates bad behaviors and thinking and mindset in our sellers. Discovery doesn't stop. Like early in the sales process, we need to discover, is there a problem that's worth solving? And then as we move through the sales process or the customer's buying journey, we need to discover the process that they have to follow, how we're going to influence that, the criteria that they need us to satisfy, and how we're going to influence that. We also need to understand the people that are involved, and are they our champion? Are they a competitor, direct competitor champion? Are they a champion of a competing initiative? Right. So discovery doesn't end. It's an always ongoing thing, all the way to the final minute until there's basically dry ink on your contract, and then we ship it on to customer success. So discovery is usually the biggest challenge that we're brought in to solve. Although people first say, "Hey, we've got a problem with like deals getting stuck at demo," or we end up giving away too much discount. In most cases, it stems back to poor discovery.
Okay, talk to me about that. So, when you get into an organization as a new VP of sales or a sales leader, and you realize that the people who were there before have done poor discovery, so I'm guessing that means that they don't really understand their ICPs. They haven't really built up a list of customers or prospects who are willing to use the software. It probably doesn't really meet their needs. I'm guessing that's the challenge you're talking about.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've noticed a lot is that people are doing demos on discovery calls. So that was kind of the pattern across both organizations. The first one, it was a founder, very technical founder, that done a fantastic job selling early stage, deals. So not a natural salesperson by trade. So totally get that. Would want to show the product, that kind of thing. Second business had a sales organization, had a sales consultant in there. But when I was jumping into call recordings, or when I first joined the business, they were doing demos on the first call, and then I was sat in forecast meetings, and reps were wondering why their deals were stalling, or they were going, "Oh, I've got no update on that deal. I should probably move it to close loss. They've not spoken to us for 6 weeks." And that's because they weren't doing any discovery. So I actually banned demos. Now, this is probably going to rub a bunch of people up the wrong way, because look, I'm all for velocity. We all want to win deals faster, but sometimes you have to go slow to go fast. And splitting discovery and demo can have a significant impact. And I actually banned demos, and one of the reps on the team went from 11% win rate to 57% win rate. And I'll happily share the HubSpot dashboard screenshot with any of the doubters out there that believe demos being splitting out demos isn't best practice and you can't do that. You absolutely can. The problem is there's a lack of skills in the sales organization to run modern day and effective discovery that helps a seller uncover a problem and then uncover if that problem is worth solving now, or can they let that thing, fester in the background for 6, 9, 12 months without there being any negative consequences.
Did you just ban demos because you knew that they were doing it at the wrong stage? Or did you feel like it was an important thing to do to try and get the sales reps to think differently about how they approached the prospects?
So I look at it through two lenses usually. One, I look at it through historically when I was a rep. And again, I think we kind of pushed out some content on our newsletter the other day about high win rates, like 75% win rates that I used to see when I was a seller. So I kind of look at like, what did I do? Because as a sales leader, I want to try and clone myself as best as I can and then give my reps the freedom to apply that to their personality and their selling style. So first I look at, what is it that I did when I was a rep that sold successfully? And then I look at the buyer. The buying has changed, and we really need to get on board with that in 2025. I'm not going to go into the detail. You just got to look at any Gartner report, any Forrester report, McKinsey Co. blog. You'll see there's lots of data that supports that buying has changed. It's getting harder, risk averse, that kind of stuff, buyer's remorse. So, the way that we have to sell and execute sales process has to change. So then look at the buyer side. And then I look at the persona and where they sit in the organization and their typical reputation and things like that. And then I think I apply, just common sense to that in most cases. And for me, in 9 out of 10 times, it usually ends up with let's run discovery separately. I mean, in fact, Matt, one of our customers that we're working on a case study with at the moment, we've been doing a kind of a retainer training and enablement program for 10 months, something like that, where we go in 1 day a month and run a very hands-on training, coaching, and kind of enablement workshops. And across a team of 15, 20 sellers, they've seen their win rate go up 44%. And I think deal size is up 14%, something like that. And in the very first session 10 months ago, the sales leader stood up in front of their entire team and said, James is here to make us great at discovery and other parts of the process. As of today, we are banning demos in the first conversation. Sales engineers cannot come in. And the looks on people's faces were a little bit nervous because they were used to bringing in sales engineers. And now look at them; their win rates have massively skyrocketed.
I used to work at an organization that had almost the opposite behavior pattern. So all the BDRs used to run the demos. And someone caught wind of the idea that actually, if you bring in a champion or someone from product, like an internal champion, right, someone who really knows the business and knows the product, you are more likely to close that deal. And before you knew it, there was one or two people in the organization that were getting snatched up by all the sales reps. They had to be on demos all day. And I remember speaking to him, and he was in the product team. He led the product team, really good guy. But he was like, I'm on demos all day now. And it's crazy. His job was literally demoing to customers. And, I can say this now, I no longer work there. But in the marketing department, our first reaction was like, why are they not doing it themselves? I get the value of having someone there who's not salesy, they're non-biased, they're just there to show you the platform and talk you through the technical aspects of it. But that's also the seller's job, right? If you require someone else like that in every demo, then are you really equipped to deliver a demo, right?
Yeah. Nothing wrong with a sales engineer or a subject matter expert, like you said, they're coming in and executing the demo. But the rep should be doing discovery first, and that should be isolated so that they can really go deep and wide into the customer's organization and start to really understand, like, is this something that has to happen? Doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow, but something has to happen. And then the impact, the negative consequence of that problem usually determines urgency and how quick that deal is going to move through the funnel. So everyone's like velocity, velocity, velocity. I need to like double up these steps at this stage so that we can get through it faster. The thing is, if you train your sellers to quantify business impact and help our customer actually understand the cost of their problem, people say you can't create urgency in sales. I agree and disagree with that. Like, I can't break into the customer's business and plant a seed that starts to grow, this massive tree, which is a problem, but I can help the prospect understand the cost of their problem, the significance, of not solving it. And that will create urgency because they'll end up realizing, wow, actually, this is actually having a massive impact on our business. The fire is probably a bit bigger than we thought. We should probably put this thing out fairly soon, otherwise it's going to have these consequences.
Yeah, I thought you were going to turn around and say, I'm going to break into their organization and turn their systems off.
Yeah, or we do that as well. Yeah, look, maybe it's a new product, Matt.
You know what? That's definitely a business model somewhere, isn't it? This will probably get cut anyway, but someone's going to
Yeah,
go in
probably.
and break something, and then actually, oh, we've got to sell you something to fix it. Actually,
Yeah.
isn't that the whole cyber security industry?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, they really well. The theory is that they release every time they do a new update. Afterwards, they release, I don't know, like a new virus that the update can't deal with. So you have to buy next year's update because otherwise, why would you keep buying it, right?
Yeah, like that. There we go.
Okay, so you've kind of answered this next question. I was going to ask you about how you assessed the reps when you got into the organization. So when you arrived, you sit down, you look in the CRM, you look at the numbers. What do you do to assess how well they're performing and also what their skill set is when it comes to sales? I mean, you've already addressed the fact that they're doing demos in the wrong place. They're doing demos on discovery calls, right? They shouldn't be doing that. Are
Yeah.
there other things that a sales leader can do to assess their team today?
Yeah. So this is a really good kind of segue, I guess, into how we solve the problem as well, right? So our unique, or I guess differentiated approach to solving B2B sales challenges is we have like 4 steps. So the first is CRM. So we connect to your CRM. I run a skill gap analysis, a win loss analysis, feed it into our AI models, and help you actually put your finger on the problem. Yeah, most organizations know they don't have enough pipeline, so they just ask their reps to do more. I was thinking about this when I was grabbing a sandwich at lunch. What I see a lot of sales leaders do, or I hear from their reps when they come to us for help, is we don't have enough pipeline, so it's really easy just to change our KPIs from 100 calls a day to 120 calls a day, and then just micro and performance manage us to those KPIs. But you're not actually solving the problem, which is why probably the tenure for sales leaders is so low, because they never actually solve the real problem. They just like KPI manage, bring in new software. They can't surely know that bringing in new technology is going to solve their problem when they know deep rooted problem is skill gaps. So phase number one, we'll connect to your CRM. We'll do the hard lift for you, where we'll do a skill gap analysis. We'll do a win loss review. We'll actually start to show you at a rep level and team roll up where you're starting to lose opportunities, where those major skill gaps are. And then we move into phase two, which is the training, where we build outcome focused training that's personalized to your context, that talks to those skill gaps. Yeah. Then we do a coaching piece, and then we do an enablement wrapper to make sure that when we leave 6, 9, 12 months later, you're set up for success. So that's kind of our four, as you know, the way that we solve the problem, those 4 pillars. Unfortunately, most people that do what we do, they come in and just do the second one only, which is training. They come in, they just run one-off, training programs, very generic, very outdated in most cases. So it misses the mark. And then 6 months later, the sales leader is in the same situation. Everyone's forgotten everything, probably because it didn't work because it's so outdated. And also it wasn't reinforced.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for anyone listening, if you want to sort of ground yourself on why one and done sales training doesn't work, think back to when you was at school. You do a course, you do a lesson, and then how much of it do you remember? You probably don't, right? Because there's no reinforcement there. There's no iteration. There's Ebbinghauser's forgetting curve, which we apply,
Yep.
which means that whatever we teach you today, you'll forget slowly over time. So when it comes to sales training, you really need to be in reinforcing it. You really need to be reinforcing it. Okay, look, James, let's get into some details because this is why everyone's listening, right? So we're going to start off with increasing the number of meetings that were booked. All right. So
Mm-hmm.
this is, which firm was this?
This is my last business.
Oh, this is your last business. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So what were the most impactful changes that you or your team made in terms of prospecting or pipeline generation that had the biggest effect? What did you do that had the biggest effect on the number of meetings that were booked?
So when I joined, there was 3 AEs, 2 SDRs. We lost to AE pretty quick. I think mainly down to kind of change, which is going to happen from time to time. So you went down to 2 SDRs, 2 AEs, booking about 6 meetings a month, 8 meetings a month, something like that. What I found was there was like 400 sequences in HubSpot, no joke. And every week the reps were building new sequences, number of sequences, and then using Zoom Info just to import email data and then just, blasting out emails, right? And when I looked at the dashboards, or when I built dashboards to start understanding like where are the gaps and what do I need to solve for, I was like, that's interesting. Are we not logging calls in HubSpot? And the reality is there was no calls being made to be logged. So just like I banned demos, this might make a few people shiver, I also banned email. I said, we're not sending any more emails until we figure out how to build pipeline over the phone, because we were sending out so many emails, Matt, internal emails were going into my spam. So one of the things I do when I take on a new organization is I have all of the reps write their job description. And it's a really easy way for me to understand how well you understand what your job is. So I say, here's a Google Doc. This is your job title. I want you to write down, if you had to promote and advertise your role, what is it that an account executive does? I mean, you'd be probably not surprised at the shock that I read when I read some of these.
It's brilliant. And I think it's what you think you should be doing versus what you're actually doing, right? It's that realization of you're putting it on paper and saying, oh, was I not meant to be doing that? You're like,
yeah.
Or should I have been doing that? Yes, you should be picking up the phone and making 100 calls a day. It's your job.
Yeah. That's how you build pipeline. So anyway, I was asked the reps to do it, and I was chasing this rep on Slack. I was like, dude, like, can I get your updated version? I sent it to you weeks ago. And I went to my spam folders in my spam folder. Internal emails were going to spam. So I was like, all right, okay, enough's enough. No more email. We're not building pipeline. It's obviously going into spam if our internal emails are going into spam. We're going to make some cold calls. My last couple of teams, when I was a rep, I had to make 100 cold calls a day and run a full sales cycle and build my own database. So, if I can do it, why can't others? They just need to be trained. So every single day, SDRs and AEs every morning were on cold call role plays. So I'd get them onto a Zoom call, onto a Slack huddle, and we would just take it in turns, practicing the opener, practicing the pitch, practicing our storytelling, practicing objection handling, asking for the meeting, that kind of stuff, over and over and over again, every single day, 5 days a week. And then in the afternoon, between, 2 and 3 on a Monday, Tuesday, and usually a Wednesday, the AEs had extra role play on discovery or demo because I had to close those skill gaps as well. And then we worked till 6 p.m. So from 5 till 6 p.m., usually 3 times, sometimes 5 times a week, I would do an hour or 45 minutes of sales training with the entire team every day. Now, that's a hell of a lot of time that most people would be like, I don't have that time, or I can't afford to take the team off the sales floor. Go and look at the dent in target that you're having by doing that, and you'll find time, you'll make time, you'll prioritize time to do it. And we did that every single day. And I think like 45 days later, we were booking 60 meetings a month. I went down in headcount and we 10x'd meetings.
That's amazing. So a few people got the cut then.
Yeah, some people didn't make it, and that's just part of life, right? Part of business. Like you drive change in the business, and some people don't like it, and they're not aligned to it. And unfortunately, but we needed significant change. And not only did we build massive pipeline, I post a screenshot all of the time on LinkedIn from Gong, because we used Gong there. All 3 of my AEs in the first quarter went from getting to about 40%, 50% of their number. The lowest attainment was 120%. I think the second was 160, and then one rep did 240% of their number. Pipeline cures all ill.
That's brilliant.
It really
Pipeline
does.
cures all ill. Brilliant. Okay, so we've talked about increasing the number of meetings that you guys were booking, right? And that's how you went about it. What about when it came to improving the time to close? So you've booked all these meetings, the teams now, they're putting more and more in the calendar. That's great. The pipeline's filling up. But you don't want it sat there, right? You don't want it to stagnate. So what do you do to improve the time to close? And specifically in your case, by 64%.
So we've built the leading skill optimization platform with 400 plus sales lessons, 12 courses from prospecting all the way through to late stage deal negotiation and more. one-to-one sales coaching and AI sales assistance. And I want to give you 7 days free access to the platform. The reason I want to do this is because nobody gets a degree in B2B sales. And after training and coaching hundreds of sales reps and teams in the last 2 years, most haven't mastered critical selling skills, and it's preventing them from being promoted, earning great money, and building a great career in B2B sales. So go to the revenueenabler.com, grab a free trial, and join hundreds of salespeople that are closing their skill gaps and mastering sales. There's a link in the video description. I'm looking forward to getting you set up. Give me a shout with any questions. Yeah, I also want to add, by the way, to this, which makes it even more satisfying and rewarding for me, is, we had growing targets. So I either win more deals or win bigger deals. So I thought, while I'm upskilling the team, which might take a little bit of time, I'm gonna have to put pricing up so that we win bigger deals, because I'm not gonna be able to teach them fast enough to go and win massive deals at the speed that I need. So I was also not their best friend at this point, because not only was I banning emails, making them make cold calls, making them do all this training and coaching every day, I also went and put pricing up 30%. And I said, don't come asking for discounts, because price is price. Go sell value, and I'm going to teach you how to do that. One of the reps, really wasn't up for it. Really, was like, hey, we're missing targets, and now you're putting pricing up 30%. And he went and closed a deal in record time with a company that employs 100,000 people at full price on the new pricing. And I was like, dude, pricing's a myth. If there's value, people will buy it. If they've got a problem, they'll buy it.
What is that all about? Is that just a confidence thing? If you've got a product, a bit like Apple, they don't really have sales, right? You go and buy an iPhone, it is the price it is, right? It's never going to be 30% off.
Yeah.
And there's confidence in that pricing. It's like, we know what it's worth. You can take it or leave it. Is that what this is about? Or is this about something else? Is it about giving the team confidence? Was it about pushing them to, really sit down and go, oh my God, I've got to sell this now, and I don't have any leverage on the price, so they're going to have to try different methods. They're really going to have to push for it.
It all stems back to skills, Matt. Like, if you know how to find a problem that's having a big impact on a business, and part of that comes from really good pre-call planning. We're building a lot of AI tools now that help you find and build a hypothesis before the call, so that you can jump straight into deep discovery and help the customer put their finger on the problem and help them, quantify it. If you can uncover that a business is losing 750 grand a quarter through, poor sales execution, and you're asking for 75 grand to solve it, I mean, come on, it's like a no-brainer, right? And I hate saying that, but it is. But if you just know they're running a bad sales process, but you don't know how big the problem is, 75 grand sounds like a hell of a lot of money. Yeah. So there was that part. If you had the skills, which we got them, and that's how they went and sold bigger deals. But how do we reduce the time to close by 64%? A couple of things. One, we got really good at building urgency around our business case. We started to build out go live plans. So started to really document, we call them the 3Ds. So discover, document, drive. So discover the decision process and the paper process, and influence it. Hey, we recommend that you do this because your peers do it as well. Do you believe that we should do that? Yes, lock it in. Document it. Doesn't need to be a fancy mutual action plan software or digital sales room. A simple Google Doc with your business case will work. Don't get me wrong. We partner with great technology companies where you can put this stuff in, but get the basics down first. So document the process and then drive through it, execute it. So when you actually know the path to success, it's amazing how creative you get. And you jump on a call with procurement once budget's been approved, and you say, hey, these are the typical steps that we need to execute from our side. What's missing from your side, or what's irrelevant based on how you procure technology? Document that stuff and be like, hey, can we run these two side by side? And what you do is you just stop being reactive and you're very proactive, because a lot of sellers are like, hey, I just received this vendor onboarding form, and it's come 10 days after the last meeting. They just lost 10 days, and now they're going through a form that they might not even need to go through, but they're just sat around waiting for stuff to happen, playing ping pong in the office, because that's how the companies are building culture. So if instead, sorry, I saw a post about it this morning and it got to me. But instead, if we were really focused on the 3Ds and documenting the process and the people involved, we can actually start making our way through that a lot faster. And that's one of the things that helped us as I deployed MEDDPICC for the third time. Now we obviously help other organizations operationalize it, but I put all my team through training on MEDDPICC and then held them accountable to using it. And guess what? We just started winning deals faster, a lot faster.
So you gave them a framework, which really
Yep.
worked for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
How did they respond to all the changes? You've gone in there and you're going to say, right, this organization, this sales team needs to be revamped. We're going to take away demos. We're going to increase pricing. Like, how do people respond to that? And like, how do you as a sales leader manage that?
Yeah, I need to inspire them. I need to build trust and confidence. So I did some of it with them. I'd make cold calls. I'd do discovery calls. I'd do some demos. I would do it with them. I would join them. I'd give them feedback, coaching, all of that kind of good stuff. I kind of came across this like little mini framework a long time ago. I think it's called like 25-1. So you get a pen and paper, you write down 20 things you need to do. And then underneath the top 5, you draw a line. And then you erase those 15 things and you're left with 5. And then you look at those 5, you order them in order of importance. And then underneath the top one, you draw a line and you erase the other 4. And you've got your one thing that you need to go all in on. And then you just execute that. And then you move on to the second one.
It's such a great thing to do. Everyone should do that at the beginning of their day as well. People should do that at the beginning of a meeting. When you've got
100%.
Here's an agenda with like 20 things on it, and you're like, you know what, actually, we've only got 30 minutes. Like, scrub out those 15. Well, that's good to know. Like, and I think it's really good for people to understand. You can go into a new organization, and if you're a sales leader, you can make changes, and you're going to want to make changes, right? The reason that you're there is probably because they need someone new to come in and revamp the system.
Yep, and fast as well.
Fast.
Like when we're talking to sales leaders and they're like, I'm kind of on the fence, I need results fast. If you do these things right, you can get results fast. Like, you're not going to get them tomorrow. Let's say the first 90 days, we went from 6 to 60 meetings being booked a month. We had reps going from 11 to 57% win rate. We went from 40% target attainment to 240%. We reduced time to close, I think this is like the first 5 months, by 64%. Deal size went up 30% because I was spending so much time training, coaching on the commute into the office or on days when I'm working at home. You would see me in my office listening to gong calls and stopping and tagging reps in key moments. When I saw like elite selling, Matt, I would take snippets of those calls and I would drop it into my Slack channels and say, epic talk track, or listening skills, or deep dive discovery here, Matt. Guys, this is what great looks like. And I was continuously reinforcing it, banging the drum, sounding like a politician, right, when they're campaigning. But I had to drive change. And that came from training and then continuous, training and reinforcement.
Okay, that's fantastic. I think what you said is really important about how long it took, because I think a lot of people listening to this are going to want to implement something straight away. They're going to want to take their team and say, right, we need to go to, from 6 to 60 meetings by next week. And actually, sometimes that's not that realistic. Okay, you need to
it's not.
implement the training. But I think also what stood out there to me is that if you are a sales leader and you're someone who's, I've seen this, the head of sales is trying to sell, they're on demos, they've got their own pipeline, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you actually invest that time in training your team, you can step away from doing that. I mean, you might want to continue doing it and you might need to be involved when it comes to some of those bigger deals, right? But essentially, if your team are performing well, you shouldn't need to sell. So, I mean, James, you tell me, is that an indicator? If I picked up a sales team now, I don't know, go down the road, find a business, knock on the door and say, hey, can I just have a look at your sales team? And the head of sales is in there and he's on the phone trying to sell as well. Is that an indication that the team are underperforming?
Maybe and maybe not. So like at Staff Circle, even when the team got to 10, 12 reps, whatever, I was still doing some demos. If a couple of meetings had cancelled, I'd spend 2 hours smashing the phones, cold calling, trying to book some meetings, and then whoever performed well that day, I would distribute the meetings out as a bit of an incentive. We grew that business 1,000%, right? So maybe not, but it could be an indicator that maybe you're not spending your time in the right places. And I've got no problem admitting that, right? Again, when I became a sales leader, I got even less training on how to build a team, how to build a plan, how to build a model, how to hold people accountable, how to do coaching, all of that kind of stuff. So, I made a bunch of mistakes, loads of mistakes. It's where the sales university's basically come from. It's all of the mistakes that I'd made and learned from, and then highlighting them so you don't go and do it, and then giving you the better way, the more effective way, the proven way to go and do it. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with doing a little bit, because I think you should keep your ear close to the ground. Times change, as we talk about a lot, right? And I want to be able to spot those patterns, or at least be on the ball. There's this old saying that really resonates with me is, it takes a long time for bad news to travel uphill. So by the time it gets to you, it's usually too late. And then you start to panic, make knee-jerk reactions. You start testing loads of stuff. Stuff starts to work, but you don't really know what it is. So you don't know what to turn off. You're terrified to turn things off. And when you do, you might turn the wrong thing off. So keep your ear close to the ground, so that when you can start to see things are changing, things are getting tougher, you might start to notice that a sub-industry you sell into has had new policy or new laws or legislations that have come out, which means it's harder to procure technology or whatever. Like, if you keep your ear close to the ground, you should be able to spot that stuff at your door or making its way, and then you can start to build strategy to kind of mitigate that risk and prevent it from having a significant impact.
Yeah, I completely agree. And look, just before we go, I want to give you some time to reflect. And I think maybe you've done that a little bit in this show.
Yeah,
But let's look at some outcomes and lessons, right? So when you look back, what's the single initiative or change that you made that had or delivered the biggest return on investment?
I don't know, the listeners will probably hate this. Just putting in the reps, making the time, forcing the time to listen to your sellers' calls, doing skill gap analysis, doing a win-loss review across the last 10, 15, 20 deals that you won and lost. And, if you're listening to this and you want access to the AI model that we've built, it kind of analyzes that in about 60 seconds and tells you at a rep level where you need to run coaching. But like, put in the time, listen to the calls, be present when you're doing it. So if you're in Gong or some kind of call recording tool, or you're joining a call live and you're not playing a role, but you're just there for support, but really you're coaching, make sure you're not looking at Salesforce or Facebook or Slack or email. Like, be 100% present, listen to the call, and then have one-on-ones with your team and actually coach them, help them become better, help them become more self-aware. When I left my last business, quit that job to start this business, yes, I wanted to do this, but I also felt really comfortable because I built great relationship with the sellers, the AEs especially, because I spent so much time with them, training, coaching, one-on-ones, around a whiteboard, trying to break through different challenges and stuff. I also was a little bit nervous at first, like when I was considering it, like, am I, quitting them? And then I started to find that they were coming to one-to-ones like, hey, Matt, I know what you're going to ask me. I know what you're going to say. You listen to the call with blah, blah, blah. You're going to say this and you're going to say that. And I was like, dude, like, love that, because they're becoming more self-aware. They know what to look for. They're starting to look at it like I am. And for me, I think that's what coaching is really all about, is help people become more self-aware, help them come up with the answers so that you can retire yourself. You can sit on the bench and know that they're going to go out and play the best game, and when things are tough, they know how to pivot, they know what to look for, and they know how to execute. So yeah, put in the time, make it easy for your reps to become more self-aware, help them close their skill gaps, and you'll earn a hell of a lot more money. And I mean, you will also breathe into a brown paper bag a hell of a lot less at the end of the quarter.
That's some great advice, actually. And I was going to ask you about what advice have you got for sales leaders trying to replicate your success? What's the one thing that they usually overlook? I think you probably answered it a little bit there, but is there anything specific that you would say to a sales leader today who has listened to this and they're like, you know what, I want to go and try and implement some of those changes?
Yeah, so regardless of where you document Playbook, I'm a big fan of Notion, just because the way that you can kind of lay it out. But start at the top of the funnel and start building your playbook. So like when you build a compensation plan, you're always thinking about the gray areas. Where can a rep earn double bubble? If they close, a 2-year deal instead of a 3-year deal, do they get 20% commission instead of 10? They'll find a way. So when you're building out the playbook, I want you to think about, where could I struggle in execution? So whenever I build playbooks, I have them as sales stages. I start at the top of the funnel and I work my way through, and I don't move on to the next one until I start to see strong execution. Because if I don't, then I know that the next step isn't relevant at this stage. I need to fix the problem above. So I think about, let's take discovery. I've got my discovery stage, or my first conversation with a prospect. What do I do before a call? So how do I make sure they show up inspired and educated? So what are my pre-meeting templates? What do they look like? How do I build those? How do I build a call plan? What does a call plan look like? How do I go and pull together a hypothesis? How do I build, personalized discovery questions based on that hypothesis? So pre-call, and then during the call, how do I execute that call? And then I show my team how to do it. And then post-call, what do I need to do? CRM admin, follow-ups, nurture, stakeholder mapping, multi-threading, whatever it might be. Have that post conversation playbook and then document it, get reps to sign off on it, and then train, enable, coach them, hold them accountable to executing it, building exit criteria into the CRM, into the sales process, and then move on to the next and just make your way through it. And again, whenever I'm kicking off a program with organizations, regardless of, sophistication of their market or their business, I usually say, hey, Matt, just while I kind of get my head around what it is that you guys do so I can build the training, can you send over your playbook? I usually get like a 5-slide PowerPoint PDF, which has the stage name and like some kind of screenshot in there of some part of their product or something, or some fields they need to fill in the CRM or something like that. It just doesn't really help sellers. They need the detail. None of us go to university and get a degree in B2B sales. So we all stumble into sales. Most of us get no formal sales training. Let's actually start qualifying our sellers. Let's go and start getting them ready to go and sell and take the time to build that process.
Absolutely. And I kind of wish they did do a degree in B2B sales, actually. It'd be far more useful than my first degree. So
probably. I mean, I don't have one, so I can't say that. But I mean, you get to use some of yours, I guess, for some of the work we do, right?
You don't need one. You don't need one. We're here talking about your success today, and I think that says everything. Last question I have for you, actually. If you look back at your career as a VP of sales or an SDR or an AE, what's the one sale that stands out for you?
So I was an AE, very early stage startup, probably, I don't know, 6 years, 8 years ago, something like that. And we were up against a really big powerhouse in the US that had raised $100+ million, very well-known brand. And it was a data play. And they were selling, this basically company was in Germany. They were a global business, but had main focus on Europe. And we were a European business with a main European database with some coverage in the US. Our competitor was in the US. Main coverage was in the US for obvious reasons. Very small data set in Europe, but had very great positioning. Probably had very good consultants that were advising them on how to position differentiation and stuff. And we ran a really great sales process. We're about to lose the deal. The company in the US had dropped the price like to a ridiculous level. And I was like, I'm really sorry, I can't even get close to that. But I flew to Germany. We had a conversation in person and I brought up their annual report. And I said, in your annual report, it mentions that there's going to be continued focus and expansion into the rest of Europe with some, but limited focus into North America. And I said, just kind of playing devil's advocate here. Imagine you move forward with the other provider and you realize that majority of their database is really set up for North America, not so much Europe. How could that impact that expansion into the rest of Europe? And this very senior person said, well played, we'll move forward. And I closed that deal. And I think we ended up being 3 times as expensive as the company in the US after they discounted the deal.
James, this is competition trap setting. Did you listen to your own podcast?
I did. Funnily enough, I do drink my own champagne. So yeah, made a load of mistakes over the years, but also, that wasn't a massive deal. I think it was like 70 grand or 80 grand or something like that. But yeah, the journey, the wins, those small wins, they stay with you forever.
Well, I wasn't expecting a callback to last week's episode, but I'm glad we got it in there. Well, thank you everyone for listening to this week's episode of Hit Your Numbers. And if you like what you heard, make sure that you subscribe to our Hit Your Numbers newsletter. It is weekly B2B sales advice in your inbox every Monday. You do not want to miss it. And if you are looking for more support in your day-to-day as a seller and a sales leader, do check out the Sales University. We have recently launched 3 new courses. We have Ghosting Ready, Competition Trap Setting Ready, and Pitch Deck Ready, which is coming out this month. All the links are in the show notes. And until next time, keep learning, keep selling, and go hit your numbers.
This episode is sponsored by I'm Just Playing, but I do have 2 things for you today. So we recently released a mini prospecting course, 100% free to access, where I break down the script that my last team used to go from 6 meetings a month to 60 meetings per month. There's a lesson on how to write great first outbound emails. And then there's another lesson on video and voice note prospecting and best practices. And there's so much more in the course as well. If you want to get free access, just click the link in the description below. Now, alternatively, I said there's a second thing. Maybe you don't need prospecting support, but maybe you need help running better demos or scoring your deals with MEDDPICC, or you need help with prospects that are ghosting you. If this is the case and you want to unlock some of these trainings and resources, go ahead and join the prospecting course anyway, because you'll find there's other resources and more content in the mini content vault folder. So go sign up today and unlock these resources.